it's been great listening to you all, because I think all of your messages and everything that you're saying, for me, how I'm receiving it, there's a big section of society, which is the majority of society, it's the masses, and that's where the fashion industry, that's the marketing, PR, everything is aimed at the masses. And if you're on the sidelines, you stay on the sidelines if you allow yourself to stay there, if you don't have a voice. And I see all of you panelists as having a voice. And so that voice becomes relevant when the masses get used to whatever it is that they've been fed. That becomes boring, and then it kind of opens up the way, because in my experience, my parents came to London in the 50s, and they were black, Nigerian, dark-skinned, and they were not accepted, so their stories are exactly like yours. It was awful. Travis, your experience about experiencing violence, that's what my mum and dad went through because of their skin colour. Very visible, they couldn't blend into the background. So now it's 2016, and I can walk wherever I want as a dark-skinned black woman, and it's okay. I might get looks, it might be, go up north and it might be difficult, but essentially you guys are telling a story which I like to believe that in another 10 years or so, that the masses will be absolutely accepting of everything that you're saying, and you can walk freely, and you can feel you can be who you are without having to say, what did you call it, Travis?
Call it my safety outfit.
Yeah, without having to don a safety outfit, which is like insane. I've never even heard of that before. It's completely insane. But, more power to you, and I'm inspired by that. So that was my comment. It's just been, I can see all of your stories in other timelines, in other, experiences here in the UK at least. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
I just wanted to add to what they do say. I'm not a student, I'm Alexis' mum. And
so embarrassed.
And I've always, for me personally, I just love what I've heard today about how it's just amazing. Because as a young girl, when I was growing up, I was born in the UK but grew up in Ghana. I came over when I was 12. And I've always been like the black sheep of the family. I never kind of conformed to what my mum and dad wanted me to be. So it was always, why can't you be normal? And I always used to say, what does normal mean? What is the definition of normal? And I've always said to myself that when I have my kids, I'm always going to let them be who they are and be free and express how they are and who they want to be in society.
Alexis' mom is trying to make me cry right now. What's a day? Alexis' mom.
I mean, to add to that, I'm actually totally dyslexic, so I can't read and write either. So it was like, what's wrong with this girl? My parents always kind of found like, should we just kind of dump her somewhere? She doesn't fit into how a family should be. So my daughter decided she was going into fashion. And I said to her, do you know what? I am 100% behind you. Go for it, and you're going to do really well. Okay. And my mum's, every time we go to visit my mum, which is her grandma, she would say, oh, I've got a grandson who just plays music, because my son's a musician, and I've got a daughter who just sews clothes. None of them are doctors, lawyers, or solicitors. Yay! So, and if anyone's got African sort of background, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not one of the three, you don't belong. So I actually went into London College of Fashion, and I studied fashion, hair and makeup, and how to make wigs. And I completely broke that barrier in my family. Mm-hmm. And I'm still sort of the outcast. Everywhere I go, my God, she's a bit different, but that's me. And I love each one of you for what the stories you've told today, for being different, for being who you are, and continue to aspire to be who you want to be. And hopefully, like the lady said, in future, I want to see your clothes on the catwalk. I don't know, I'm sorry. I want to see your clothes. I think you're amazing. You've really inspired me today. But in the middle, sorry, I'm not really good with names. With a bow tie and your style. Amazing. Continue to be, never change and never conform to what society want you to be.
Well, Alexis' mom is really, all black people, everything.
I'm
invited me today. I almost not came, but I said, I'm going to drop everything I'm doing, I'm going to come along with you, because I know that she's going to do well, and the stories you've told today have really inspired her, Because every time she does her project, what the lectures are looking for. And I say to her, just keep going, because you're going to make it. And you're going to help her, obviously, to get to where she wants.
You're going to be really grateful in 20 years for this conversation. So we'll just hold that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
sharing.
So the most beautiful thing is like there's this like narrative in the media that the black community is so against trans and is so against like other sexualities, and I think what's just happened just proves that wrong. And I think like there's so many different stories that we hear about, and I actually wanted to go back to the agenda. Like, what do you think about companies? Because to me, it's like you're just jumping on the struggle. Like, you don't care, but where is there a percentage of the profits going into something, or how? Although we need it, and not everything can be like given back to charity, because we live in a capitalist world and everyone wants to make money. But how can? What for you would show that? Oh, actually, say for example, LV just done this campaign and they've highlighted Jason, but how then can you believe that they're being genuine? What would they need to do to show you their genuineness?
So I think like one, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's hard under capitalism for it ever in that kind of structures to be truly genuine. What would tell me that I would maybe get behind it more and maybe like not hold it up to as much, like I'm not going there, is like who's designing their clothes, who's leading the marketing campaigns, who's again that head of the table. So if I saw that like transgender queer models that aren't just white, slim and able-bodied were there, and if I saw that they were being designed by like the amazing trans designers that we know exist and are out there, and the right to the core, it was like held with trans POC, like down to the styling of the shoot, down to the photographer, down to like the people writing it, because all these people exist, right? Like in all the creative industries, they're there. Then I'd be like, oh, this is hella dope. Maybe I can, like, I will jump on it. Like, fuck it, I would jump on that bandwagon, right? Because that would show me that they're not commodifying on it. Instead, they're saying, look, yo, this is something we don't know about. Let's give it to the experts, right? Because they're the experts, we're the experts. So, like, yeah, like, I'd love to see, because I'm, like, you know, there's so many, we always get these little art, especially at the moment, I feel like, because it's February, I feel like, because Vice has this thing on queer and transness at the moment, that, like, we're seeing so many up-and-coming, amazing, like, trans, all of these little, all of these different categories and subsections of art world. What would it look like if we got given the funds? We weren't, like, being told to do it for free for, like, some exposure. Instead, we were given, like, money in every aspect. Then I'd be like, yeah, let me go buy these clothes.
Yeah, real. And also a way that's like what Travis said is already under the iceberg, but I think if we like got all the way to the root of the matter, and just to recognize, like, I think about it, it's not like a new idea, but like what Raju has been saying like throughout, and specifically it sounds like in their work, working with these materials, has also made it really clear for me that given the reins, given the funds, but another way to not exist on this like zero-sum capitalist tip, this like capitalist game would be the people that are producing the cloths and like doing the like dyeing the wool and doing all this stuff were paid a living and sustainable wage. So granted, there's still that like the capitalist enterprises that can still do that, but I actually don't think it's true. I think it's also in line with like the narratives that you're saying that we're being fed in the media, like the people who are like up and coming fashion moguls, like the Kanye West, or like that's the worst example because you know he's the worst, but like who always is talking about like getting money, getting paper, looking like everybody wants these Yeezys, and then I had to Google what those were, and then you know, but then also being in all this debt. Like if pursuing your art shouldn't have to go hand in hand with capitalism. Obviously, we're like not be naive. We're under a capitalist system, but it could be that you want to like have self-expression or whatever your motivations are for producing this thing, this like cultural artifact, this object, this thing for practical use. also have it sustain your family, but also sustain the families of the people that got you there as well. So it could be that, like in this like idealist sort of space that I think is actually really sustainable and really possible, it could be that everyone gets enough to like not just like have a livable wage, but like thrive and pursue their own passions and their own arts and their own creative whatever they want to pursue. And then even if the balance at the end of the day was zero, we would have like a thriving and sustainable community that was built by us and also was for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I wouldn't feel comfortable wearing a range of clothes that are marketed towards me as an androgynous, genderqueer, trans, whatever person, off the backs of someone who's being exploited and being oppressed in order to make those clothes. Like, even if they were really nice clothes, I wouldn't. I mean, I hardly ever buy clothes now anyway, because I'm just really conscious about where it comes from and how it's made and how it's produced, and I just buy secondhand clothes, to be honest. But I just feel like struggles have to be connected. You know, you can't
That's
just
what I'm
have
saying,
gender. Yeah, exactly. So for me, I would have to see all of that.
That's a good way to say it.
Yes, the back.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I work in the diversity team at
Not really.
Just speak up a little bit.
I'm Beth, and I work in the diversity team at the university.
Okay.
One of our jobs is to support trans students. So students who are coming into the university and identify as trans in any way, our job is to try and work with them and make sure that the university is a more inclusive place. And a couple of years ago, one of our students said that the first time she came to UAL, she was just looking for a sign that said that trans students are welcome. And I'm just wondering from the panel, what would be the one thing that, a couple of things maybe, that you would say to universities to do to make sure that they're more inclusive spaces for trans students?
So I've just left my students' union. I was just saying to Essay, like, this is just funny timing. I've just left my student. I've been like with my students' union actively campaigning and working for like 2 years over a spat with my diversity team. So this is funny, and the main reason is like my point is just like hire us. Like the thing that was getting so upsetting for me is that my diversity team were all white. My diversity team, there was no trans people. My diversity team that was talking about all this, like I don't want diversity, I want liberation, or just to walk through like the hallways about that shit. So like, my like really like I have like nice responses that may help that are fluffy that I can give you as well and email you, and that's what I've been doing with them for 2 years. But really like the mood, it's just funny that you said that stuff to myself with the diversity team. My real thing is just like hire a trans person. Like they're the people that will be able to like make trans people feel welcome. Like find them, and if that means giving up some people's jobs, or hey, creating new jobs, because unis have money, right? Like these institutions like CSM is rich as fuck. Like get some trans people working because there's trans people looking for jobs that would do the job so much better.
I mean, I don't believe in.
But good on you for asking that though. Like that didn't mean to come off like I just.
I mean, I don't believe in policy or an inclusion process, to be honest. I think scrap inclusion. I think policy is about making things look a certain way, and it's not actually making change. So I would say that not include us, we have to be at the forefront and at the centre of everything. You know, so if we're included, we're still in that system where we're just being considered and we're not actually part of it. We're not, like Travis saying, we're not the system.
So glad this is being recorded. I'm an academic, as I've said already, and where I did do my PhD was in the States, in fairness, but not really, because the university space is really in the West is a monolith in terms of like the processes of policy making and pretenses of inclusion, and I think. Yeah, look, what Travis said is really real, like on all the fronts, and Roger as well. But just like thinking of my own experiences, being at the head of student government, because they did that, right? They put me at the front. I was the main officer. It was called the solidarity officer, so they wouldn't have like diversity, because we didn't want to have like the same, like make everything equal, because I don't want equality. I want equity and liberation. But then it came to the point that people were like, like, how do we make things, they still use the word diverse, right? Because that's still the intention. How do you make this thing more diverse? How do you make things, how do we get equality? We're all for equality, California, hippies, tie-dye, etc. And then it became down to like me doing the work, right? Because I'm at the head of the table, right? So I'm the one that's doing it. I'm doing a PhD, right? So I have like, and I'm just like trying to build my art, trying to like hone my craft for my communities, etc. I'm also an activist. Like I was trying to do all these things, and it came to the point that affective labor, time, which is a resource, it became like a deficit and a detriment to my like emotional well-being, my intellectual well-being, my academic process, and then it became one of those statistics about people of color, queer, gender non-conforming people not finishing in normative time, not like living up to the standards and like doing the actual work. So while I this is not a disagreement with what Travis is saying, it's actually agreeing specifically, because if people like Travis were like not edged out of office or of a certain space, so if we were like centered and then people recognize, like regardless of like creating more jobs or like whatever capitalist thing, but just recognizing, again, it's not about you. And if you actually really believe in whatever like neoliberal ideas that you have behind diversity and inclusion, that also means you saying, yes, you like cutie pot, queer, black, trans, migrant, refugee person who's in this space, this is your job. What can I do to help you? Like, what time can I offer you? Like, you're getting paid a livable and sustainable wage. What of my resources can I put behind you? Like, I want, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a bit of a rant, but I want like the support of UAL, which is not even just you individually, like the support of the institution, which has, yes, a lot of the money, but a lot of resources. Like, they can make things easier. Like, to have the full weight, because then a student would come to you, and even if it's not in the like trans asterisk or no asterisk or welcome here. I think that sometimes when I see that, like at my university, it was like a little rainbow triangle sign, and it said, what was it? It was like safe space. They would just like have stickers, and they like put the stickers and say it was a safe space. That was the least safe that I've spent in my entire life. Do you know what I mean? And so it's not about a name or label or a sticker, but to make it felt that the university and all institutional resources are behind the people, so you can actually get things done. Because we're efficient when given the resources, and we're fierce and we can topple things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's more about inclusion and not exclusion. And I felt that when I was at UAL myself, I didn't feel like there was enough resources for me to refer to or look at as examples of, you know, where my research was going. It was more about the westernized white ideal, if that makes sense, and what they kind of embodied within that kind of design world, and that wasn't what I wanted. I was going in a different direction, and it would have just been nice that there was resources that I could refer to, or sources or individuals like myself, you know, that were like shades of world, which is obviously taking place now. If that had started when I was actually doing my degree, I think it would have made such a big difference to, you know, the way I felt about design, and obviously where my work was going, because again, it's all about inclusion, not exclusion, and that's an important part of anything, really.
Thank you. We can take one more question.
Okay, good.
Yes. Sorry.
Can you just take the book?
Yeah, we can try.
I was currently studying an MA in fashion artifacts, and I wrote my proposal last January, and it's all about breaking down barriers of gender and how to create discussion around gender inequalities. So when I started doing my research, I started posting things online, and like I have family and friends online. I got an amazing amount of abuse from like family and friends saying like, "Oh, you're a feminist now. Like, what does this mean? Are you like going to get your own gender?" And I've experienced gender inequalities in my life. Like, I've travelled alone, and that's come as really shocking to people. Oh, you're a girl, you can't travel alone. And like, I'm into fitness and boot camps, and I do that with guys, and that you're a girl, you can't do as well. So what I'm trying to do is create a collection from my degree of artifact objects that create dialogue among people to break down barriers. So how do you feel, like what kind of form do you think something should take to be able to create this dialogue among audiences? That makes sense.
Narratives, people's stories.
Yeah?
It's a good answer. What was the other question?
Sorry.
So speaking of narrative, for instance, how would you picture a gender-neutral wedding where the narrative is so restricted, the script so restricted? You know the role of everyone, the bride, the groom. How would you picture a gender-neutral wedding then?
I've lost.
Okay, just gonna go ahead with those last two questions together. Cookie, I think. Well, I wonder actually what the fun things about this, because my first thought was that there's nothing neutral about gender because it's actively murdering, oppressing, infiltrating our lives, lived experiences. It's actively taking our resources, again, emotionally, financially, and otherwise. So there's no such thing. But if people were gender non-conforming and then decided for, reasons to have a Western or normative wedding, then they'd present as they wanted to as those people, and then it would be default a gender non-conforming wedding. But the pretense of gender neutrality, also in terms of something as, I want to say ludicrous as a wedding, but those are just my own opinions. It's all my own opinions. It's almost like a direct oxymoron as far as I'm concerned, because weddings and matrimony, as we know it, exists to reinforce the state. It exists to actually uphold that women, femme or otherwise, are property. And it's, that this is the history of matrimony, right? It's in books or on Wikipedia or something. And so to then put yourself into it, it's almost like some rhetoric I hear about people wanting like queer or black or trans president, like you're still in service of something that is bigger than you, and it's at a certain point your identities get swallowed up and subsumed in service of this incredibly violent thing that should just be abolished. As for the other question, I just want to big up what Roger was saying and say, even if it is your specific project or passion or desire, to specifically at every step that you can, especially if you recognize that you have privilege, if you know what that means, and not just saying like I have privilege and then go on and walk through the world and like give yourself pats on the backs or biscuits and things, but say it legitimately is not about me, but I have this passion, but I am creative, but I have talents that I want to share with the world in service of my communities. I'm going to go around and like ask people what they think and ask for their input, and then also pay them, and then also support them and showcase them, and then recognize too, this is not about like just shedding all your power, except secretly it is. This is just like the beginning step. Just saying like privilege other people's voices and stories and narratives, and then have them in that space, and then at the end recognize that power does not have to exist in any kind of like binary sense either, that there can be a field of power in service of a collective and liberatory force.
I'll just keep it short because I know we're pressed for time. Yeah. Just like I'm interested in like what it would mean to like bring art school and access, right? Like what privileges it is for like, I'm doing a degree at the moment that already abates me like so much. What would it mean for you to then like go to the people that use the word is it art? Yeah, so so to me, objects, I'm just going to use objects, it feels more comfortable with me. So like take the objects, but also, no, not take them actually, like there's no taking involved here. You find the objects, you find who owns the objects, you bring them with you, and you say, come along, let me pay for your transport, let me get you your food, and if you've got the budget from here, let me pay you. And then your exhibition, or like however it works, is them talking about their objects from their heart. That's how you'll start a dialogue, because it will be really authentic to them. And also it then brings people that don't have access to CSM or Ravensbourne or Gryffindor. It brings them, I was thinking it right, I was like, it brings them in, and then they have like this access too, and then their voice, and you put them on the plaque too, like it's your work with these people. That would be hella dope, and then I'd be so excited to see your work and see their work too, and it becomes like this collective. I'm Team Slytherin.